Hi there and welcome to the Cyberhut TV. My name is Simon Moffat. I'm founder and analyst at the Cyberhut, and in our vendor introduction series I get the honour and privilege to chat with many leading experts in our identity security global startup ecosystem, which is a total privilege to be a part of. And today I have Apurva from Aembit. Hey, how are we doing?
Hey Simon, great to talk to you again. Doing great.
Not at all. Thanks for again taking time out. I appreciate how busy it is just trying to build out startups and change the world of identity-centric security. And for those who've not seen these episodes before, I essentially get to ask three really important questions of today's guest, and essentially start off with question number one: what is the problem that Aembit is trying to solve?
Sure. Thanks again for having us. And I think that the way to think about our problem is actually through an analogy. The problem we're trying to solve is workload, identity, and access management. And this idea of workload IAM is something most people probably haven't heard of at this point. But your audience is incredibly familiar, maybe too familiar, with user IAM at this point in time, right? We've spent 2 decades building a system to control how users access applications and services. And the user has evolved from passwords on a sticky note attached to their monitor to secrets managers, eventually to an IAM system where they're centrally controlled. Now, take that to workloads, which are like applications, scripts, functions, serverless, containers, whatever you're running that are accessing your sensitive data and services and infrastructure. How are those controlled today? Well, actually, it looks a whole lot like users did 20 years ago. Workloads depend on secrets. Secrets which are manually configured, sometimes hard-coded, sometimes stored in a vault, but it's essentially ungoverned today. And this has become a huge problem where it represents another massive attack surface that bad actors can go after. And these hard-coded secrets, these long-lived secrets represent a new form of access that the professionals in the industry really need to start governing, managing, and automating. And that's the problem we're looking to solve through the idea of workload, identity, and access management.
I love that. There's so many things I want to unpick out of that one. The governance of this and the life cycle of these things. And I think it's spot on. I think we're all really familiar with managing identity for people, even if that's
right.
Staff or with customers or whatever else. But I do think there's this huge this iceberg, or this huge iceberg of looking at workload identity, where you sort of see it at the top, but underneath, many organizations, as you say, are relying on services, APIs, all of these things under the hood to deliver applications and data and everything else. And I think you're right. I think we are in this period of, as you say, hard-coded secrets and things which are built in to these workloads, which I think is neither secure nor productive, which I think is not cool at all. So that sort of leads us to the sort of second part: is why is this becoming a problem now? Because I look at some of the stats around 50 or 60 times more workloads to people. So that to me doesn't seem good.
Yeah, the first blush is like, oh, this doesn't seem good, right? And you hit on the first why now, which is there's an explosion in these forms of identities, whether you call them workload or non-human, right? There is a absolute explosion in them. The numbers are so wide-ranging, it makes it clear that nobody actually knows how many there are, right? That's one of the core issues. The reason there's been an explosion in these identities is related to application architecture. Applications have been broken down into building pieces, whether you call them microservices, SaaS services, APIs, whatever, right? An app is no longer just a singular piece of code running somewhere, but rather is a compilation of these things, whether you're using a cloud, multiple clouds, your data center, SaaS services, you have to tie those all together. And most organizations are in some sort of flux, right? They're going through some kind of cloud transformation where they just naturally are in many of these locations. And so the broader you get, the harder it is to have a singular place to manage all the access between these locations. Now, security's always been interesting because it's a game of offense and defense. And while our identity professionals are playing defense by building strong protection around their identity, bad actors are looking to attack. And they've been doing that against user identities for a long time. They've gotten pretty good at it. But the better we get at defending there, the more those attackers move to the low-hanging fruit. And workload identities are that low-hanging fruit. Think about it. Today, those secrets we talked about before, they're all manually provisioned, right? A DevOps person creates a service account, gets a secret, copies it to their machine, sends it to a developer who then puts it in. That is a recipe for leaking all of those secrets, which bad actors can get a hold of, and boom. They don't need to find a 0 day anymore. They don't need to hack into your system. You've given them access. So the combination of this explosion of identities, this move to the cloud, and the nature of this being low-hanging fruit mean that we need to build a centralized system to manage access between these non-human identities now. It's time for enterprises to invest in solving this problem.
Yeah, I love the urgency. The time is now, and that's the cyber. We get a lot of inquiry around how to handle this stuff, because I think you're right. It's adversaries. They just go to the easiest point, don't they? They are typically lazy. They want the biggest bang for the buck. They want the biggest reward for their attacking scenarios. And I think, well, if the people-based ecosystem is okay, it's being managed well enough, as you say, they will go to the workload NHI ecosystem because it's so large. It's so large. I think that is, it's a big thing, isn't it? The increase in the numbers of services, NHI, workload, etc. The bigger that becomes, the attack surface becomes bigger. It seemingly becomes an unmanaged problem, really. So I think there's definitely urgency in trying to solve this now. And so that wheels us into the sort of last aspect, really, is what's your secret sauce, and why are you guys best placed to try and tackle some of these problems?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I think that the enterprises are going to need multiple tools, multiple solutions, multiple approaches to truly solve this problem. And so I think that it's fair to say that I think we will be a critical part of the solution, but it's broader than any one company to solve this big a problem. And we kind of recognize that, and we want to play with the community in a way that, builds us all up, the same way it happened with user identity and access management. Our goal is to produce what I would think of as the identity broker or the control plane for workload to workload access. By providing a SaaS service that allows you to create an IAM approach for workload to workload access. And our goal is to build something that's environment independent. So you need to connect multiple clouds. You need to connect cloud to on-prem. You have SaaS services that you use. You acquire a company that then has a different mix of products that you have. We want to create a universal identity broker for workloads. And our goal is threefold in this: to allow you a system that's identity-driven, policy-based, and allows you to go secretless for this workload to workload access. Through those capabilities, we want to help your DevOps and DevSecOps teams automate the process of managing workload to workload access. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. Today, it's heavily manual. People provisioning secrets and service accounts, sending those to other people, and then having to rotate all that stuff, right? Chasing it all down. Hey, where did you use that secret? How many places did it happen? So on and so forth. Instead, we wanted to build a system that gives you declarative control. Define a policy. Workload A can talk to AWS. Workload B can talk to Snowflake. My GitLab runners can talk to my GCP infrastructure, and so on. And when we define this, we then make it really easy for you to see what access is happening, control that access, deliver credentials, and then audit that behavior afterwards. And then finally, we want to tie it all together with a no-code auth approach. And we've seen a lot of folks talking about no-code auth for both user IAM and customer IAM, right? And so we wanted to build that concept in from day one for workload IAM. And obviously, they use different mechanisms to communicate to each other than humans do. And so, enabling a no code system for that means your developers don't have to think that much about auth for their workloads. Instead, they can just absorb something like Aembit, use it, and get best practices built in. So we think this approach of building the universal identity broker, the singular SaaS control plane for workload to workload access, is going to enable our customers to easily adopt workload IAM so that they can get the same benefits they saw in user IAM, but with half of the time and half the effort that they've had to put into building that system up.
I love that. It's such a complex, sophisticated way of thinking about it, isn't it? It's that end-to-end, the brokering. It's a really sophisticated way of looking like a real big industry problem. I think I do worry when I see that the numbers around sort of workload identity, 40, 50, 60 times the number of people, and then as you say, it's often manually managed, hard-coded credentials. Each application owner or dev owner has their own way of building out secrets or whatever, and it's like that has to be unified and normalized. And you mentioned things there around enabling and supporting the DevOps community. It's been secretless because, again, ultimately you don't want a secret model. That's the same as passwords, right? You want to remove that set of problems, and obviously then helping both from a productivity and security standpoint. And then I think the no code thing again, that's a really powerful aspect. Well, one quick last question: is it workload or is it non-human identity? Where do you sit on this one?
Simon, I think the first conversation we ever had, I asked you that question, right? The answer is we don't know, right? So the way I view the world right now is that many of the folks who are talking specifically about non-human identity are talking about the governance of service accounts within, think of it as target services you're trying to reach. Whereas the workload identity approach has been in the client services that are trying to reach those non-human service accounts. And should those two be called the same thing or should they be different? I'll let the analysts and the customers decide. But what I do recognize is this is an incredibly complex problem that's about the things that are not humans in your environments. And we need to figure out how to connect them, control them, and secure them in an automated way at that scale you're talking about. And we can call it whatever we want at the end of the day. Let's solve this problem for our customers.
I couldn't agree more. That's a brilliant way to think about it. I think it's, as you say, focus on the problem. And I think ultimately this is a really big problem. I think the addressable market is huge for this stuff. I think it's not just large enterprises, small, medium enterprises. It's every sector, every vertical is heading in this direction. It does sound like that Aembit's got a real end-to-end sophisticated way of tackling some of these problems. So, Purva, thank you for taking a bit of time out. You're busy day. I appreciate you've got lots going on in trying to change the world of workload identity. We'll stick with workload for now. It seems sensible. So thanks for taking a bit of time out. This has been another episode in our vendor introduction series brought to you by the Cyberhood TV. Thank you for watching. Until next time.